David Yeager brought in Craig Tennis, who was the man who picked people for The Tonight Show. I didn't know he was in the audience. So I'm doing all my hip, cool stuff, that you don't do on television. This is before Jon Stewart. Stuff you couldn't do on television. And when I came off stage, I was told, hey, I brought so-and-so from The Tonight Show in. I said, oh, really? He said, and I'm going to tell you exactly what he said about you. Quote, he said, David Brenner does vomit material. Not only will he never be on The Tonight Show, we won't let him in the building at 30 Rock. Well, you don't tell that to a street guy because we get PO'd real fast. I said, I told you I want to do one show before I quit and go and do something in life other than telling jokes. That's the show. I'm doing The Tonight Show. I said, I'm going to do it. So what I did is I went every, like Wednesday, they had finger sandwiches and the acts would come out and audition. I made believe as a manager, I put on my one suit and I'd eat. This is where I ate Wednesday nights at the Victor J. Theater. I ate. And I watched the show, I watched the audition. I got to be familiar with the room. I put together my best stand-up, the best one I had. I cranked it. I worked it. I slept with it. I ate it. I worked just for that one shot, 6-minute shot. And I auditioned. And I blew, the bricks came out of the walls. And I got a call, it was January 7, 1971. My television agent called and said, Tonight Show called, they want you for tomorrow night. You ready? And I did a real corny, when the covered wagon. And it was a movie with John Wayne. And Ward Bond said, he said, are you ready? And Ward Bond said, I was born ready. So I did that stupid thing on the I was born ready. And I went on the next night, and it was a dream night. You couldn't write a better script to happen to a person than what happened to me on that Tonight Show. And Craig Tennis came up to me after the show, and he shook my hand. He said, you made me a hero tonight. Thank you. Because he's the one who booked me. Interesting, huh?
That's incredible.
Whatever you like in life. You like boxing? Well, we got some tapes of Joe Louis. You never saw him. You're too young. Huh? You like football, you like basketball, we got this guy. We got the best of any sport. The best of any sport. And then take the best acting. Say Paul Muni from way back when. The best in each field. You want an opportunity to see the best at work. You got to watch Johnny Carson because there's no one even close. I made sure when I did The Tonight Show, hosting The Tonight Show, that at the end, when you're saying who's on tomorrow night, I always thanked him on the air for letting me sit in his chair. If Johnny came back and I just had a moment with him, I would thank him again for giving me my career and let me sit in a chair. And then I'd say to him, you have never been replaced. No one's even come close. And I don't think anybody ever will. You were the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a saga of how an obscure cowboy poet wound up being on probably the greatest show television has ever produced. That's right, and it was by accident. Because, wait a minute, we forgot to tell who I was, didn't we? Baxter Black, cowboy poet and former large animal veterinarian. I got a call in 1984. And it was a lady, I can still remember her name, but I'm not going to use it here because as nice as she was, she called up, and I had just moved to Denver and just gotten married, and so my life was trying to get back on track. And I got this calling. I remember standing in the living room where my little office was in Brighton, Colorado, and I picked up the phone, and I'd been on several local television stations in Denver, and I couldn't keep track of all their names. And so this lady called up, and she introduced herself, and Joyce, she said, and I'm with the Tonight Show. And my first thought was, well, it's another show in Denver. I didn't think of it in those terms. And I was on the road also a lot, entertaining. And she said, someone has given us your name to be on our show. And I said, well, thanks. Who was it? She said, well, the guy's named John Silva. I said, well, I don't remember him, but okay, good. And they said you'd be good on the show. And I said, well, okay, maybe I could be on it. If I'm in town, if I'm not busy, you know, I'm on the road a lot. And I'm not an impolite person, you know, at all. I'm very nice usually and cordial. But I must have been in a hurry because I said, you know, I'll you know, if I can work it in, I'll be on your show, but I'm on the road a lot. And can you send us something? Yeah, I said, I've got a cassette here. I just made my first cassette called Baxter Black's First Cassette. Where do you want me to send it? I'm writing, I'm standing up, I'm holding the phone like this, and I'm writing with a pencil on this thing. The Tonight Show, I wrote that down. When my pen got to Burr, I said, wait a minute, is this a Johnny Carson show? She said, yes. And you can cut this part because she said, and you're not going to be on it. She said, yes, it is. I said, well, great. So I said, man, well, give me the address, everything. I can clear the decks, you know, whatever I got to do. And, well, send me your stuff. So I sent her the stuff, and I got this letter back about a week later. Still have the letter in my scrapbook, declining my invitation. And it was a nice letter, but it just said, you know, it wouldn't work and you wouldn't work. And so I called her back. I said, listen, she said, I said, well, what was the matter? She said, well, we listened to your stuff, and she said, you're too cowy. I said, well, that's what I know about. You know, I'm a cowboy. That's what I'm supposed to know about. You know, I'm not a fashion designer or an oyster picker. I said, I'm cowy. Well, she said, just too cowy, it won't work. Well, I took it upon myself to try and change her mind. Because I am a shameless self-promoter, I called everyone I knew who was semi-famous, and I barraged them for several years, actually, but I would say a matter of, barraged them for a couple of years with everyone I know, writing and calling and giving them letters and saying, yeah, he'd really work on there. And then the Cowboy Poetry Gathering was invented in Elko, Nevada. And I got invited to go there. And it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to a person like me, because I was the only human on earth who was making a living doing cowboy poetry. So I showed up at that, and Time Magazine and Newsweek and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the San Francisco Chronicle and the People Magazine and Johnny Carson got wind of the Cowboy Poetry Gathering. It was just something odd about it. And they came and they actually called me. And they said, they've given me your name to call, this is the same lady, to be on the Johnny Carson show. She said, are you a cowboy? I said, you know, I'm a cowboy poet. I don't even own a cow. But then you got to remember, cowboys don't own cows. They work for people who own cows, which is basically what I'd done all my life. So she said, well, if you're not a real cowboy. I said, well, I'm an entertainer now. Well, we don't think you'll qualify. So they wouldn't let me on. So the next year came by, and they passed me over again. And finally, Jim McCauley called up, and he said, these are his words, are you ready? Meaning, have you learned your lesson? Yes, I said, I have, and I was sycophantic. I fell at his knees and said, yes, I'm ready. So he said, we want to have you on January. And that's how I got to be on the Johnny Carson show.
You see, Bob, why do you remember that whole poem? No problem at all. Now, Baxter, I understand you started out as a veterinarian, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And now you perform frequently.
Well, I wound up doing this cowboy poetry for a living.
Uh-huh.
I go to big places like Buffalo, Wyoming.
Yeah.
I had this poem I wanted to do, And you got to appreciate that poems are not like stories. You can screw them up, and then you're just sitting there with egg on your face. So I'm in the back of the studio walking around up and down these aisles doing this poem over and over and over so I wouldn't forget it. And one of the ladies, and everybody was so nice, this lady stopped me and she said, "Are you all right?" I said, "I'm afraid I'm going to forget my poem." And she said, "Duh, we've got teleprompters, you know." And I said, "I don't need no stinking teleprompter." And I do not know a single cowboy poet who was on the Johnny Carson show that used a teleprompter. We all went out there because it's the chance of screwing up that makes it tight and good. It's like backing up in the box or climbing over a bull, you know.
You want to give us a little sample?
Well, there's traditional cowboy poetry, and then there's a lunatic fringe, which is kind of my area.
Okay.
So I go on the show. I have no real memory of being on the show. Thank goodness we taped it. But I was so pumped that when it was over with, I went back out onto the stage so I could tell people what it looked like, because I couldn't remember. But the next job I went to, the crowd had doubled. And it was in some place like, you know, Havre, Montana. It was a big deal. It did not change where I spoke. I make a living in the country, and I tell, in the agricultural community is what I call it, and public radio added to that. But you got to remember, people in the country watched Johnny Carson too. He was everywhere. And country people had an affection, and I'm counting myself here, for Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson understood us, and the cowboy poets as a group are not sophisticated people in the sense that you would think here in Hollywood. All this is new to us, and it's, you know, we get used to it, and we're not stupid, and we have, you know, we can handle our own wherever we are, but it's just not our world. And we are you could be very easily a subject of ridicule or offside jokes. Look at these hayseeds. Johnny Carson never did that. He always respected who we were, and I think it's because of where he came from. Someone could judge us better than me, but Johnny had a good sense of what was funny. And I watched videos of myself and other people, and you know he's listening to the audience. Johnny Carson was listening to the audience, and when it worked, he knew it. I chopped and I whacked without looking back, then I stealthily slipped in the door. My bounty lay naked, dying. So I drowned them to snuff out their life. I sliced and I peeled as they thrashed, and they reeled on the cutting board under my knife. I violated tomatoes, so their innards could never survive. I grated and ground till they made not a sound, then I boiled the tater alive. And then I took the small broken pieces I had tortured and killed with my hands and tossed them together, heedless of whether they suffered or made their demands. I ate them. Forgive me, I'm sorry. And all of the cowboy poets, instead of being out on the stage by ourselves, sat by him. So we were talking to him and telling him a story. And we made it that way, or he made it that way. We didn't even know that he was doing everything he could to give us a break so we wouldn't fall on our face, because I think we were where he came from. But hear me, though I'm a beginner, those plants feel pain. So it's hard to explain to someone who eats them for dinner. I intend to begin a crusade for plants' rights, including chickpeas. And the ACLU will be helping me, too. In the meantime, please pass the blue cheese.
That's marvelous. That's great. Thank you, Becky. We'll be back.
I wanted to be able to present me. I wanted to do good for Johnny. I mean, the worst thing I could have done, and I remember watching those shows that I've done, one of the worst things I could have done is to disappoint Johnny Carson. You know, when I look at these videos and Johnny Carson says, and I'm looking at, because I never, you know, I'm on there, I'm doing my deal, I know my stories and I don't want to screw it up, and then I walk off the stage and man, wow, whew. And I look back now and I say, I hear him say things like, now that's funny. Now that was good. You know, that's like patting old chap on the head, man, I'll tell you. That's what sinks inside of me whenever I look back. I didn't get to know him personally at all. He was a very private man, and never was in his office or anything, but he was always gracious, and he always treated us like family, I guess. He just treated us good. He had a good heart. You know, I don't think about that. Things in life go by, and he had his world and I had mine, and I got to be in his for a little while. You know, when you're a grown man, life goes on. But when he died, you know, I went out and cried because it was a big deal. He was so good to me. And I've had many occasions when so many people have had so much influence on my life, and they don't even know it. I don't think he thought about what he was doing for anybody that was on his show. This is my guess. He was doing his deal, was trying to be a nice man, and he cared about you, and he went to the next person. And you don't sit around and linger on your effect and the ripples that come rolling through your life. You know, I write this down as a joke, and I think it's my accomplishments. You put it on my tombstone. I was on the cover of USA Today on the Johnny Carson Show and fed the snakes at the Dixie Chicken. How can you beat that? So I wrote this poem, and I'd gotten this great idea, and I explained on the show the setup, which was that they've discovered that plants feel pain. So I wrote this poem. It inspired this poem called The Vegetarian's Nightmare, or a dissertation on plants' rights. Broccoli power. Ladies and diners, I make you a shameful, degrading confession. A deed of disgrace. In the name of good taste, though I did it, I meant no aggression. I had planted a garden last April and lovingly sang it a ballad. But later in June, beneath a full moon, forgive me, I wanted a salad. So I slipped out and fondled a carrot, caressing its feathery top. With the force of a brute, I tore out the root, and it whimpered and came with a pop. Then laying my hand on a radish, I jerked, and it left a small crater. Then with the blade of my true value spade, I exhumed a slumbering tater. Celery I plucked, I twisted a squash. Tomatoes were wincing in fear. I choked a romaine, it screamed out in pain. Their anguish was filling my ears. I finally came to the lettuce as it cringed at the top of the row. Ooh, ooh, ooh. With one wicked slice, I beheaded it twice. As it writhed, I dealt a death blow. I butchered the onions and parsley till my hoe was all covered with gore. I chopped and I whacked without looking back. Then I stealthily slipped in the door, and my bounty lay naked and dying. So I drowned them to snuff out their life. I sliced and I peeled as they thrashed and they reeled on the cutting board under my knife. I violated tomatoes so their innards could never survive. I grated and ground till they made not a sound. Then I boiled a tater alive. Then I took the small broken pieces I had tortured and killed with my hands and tossed them together. Heedless of whether they suffered or ate, made their demands. I ate them. Forgive me, I'm sorry. But hear me, though I'm a beginner. Those plants feel pain, though it's hard to explain to someone who eats them for dinner. I intend to begin a crusade for plants' rights, including chickpeas. And the ACLU will be helping me, too. In the meantime, please pass the blue cheese. I'm occasionally asked, how did those hostile vegetarians take that? Well, they told me to go forth, be fruitful, and multiply. Not exactly in those words, but...
Well, I'm Jim Fowler, and thanks for coming down to my little Serengeti here with all the animals. This is kind of a hideaway down here in Albany, Georgia. And, you know, I've worked with animals all my life, and that's one of my tickets to get to doing a lot of things on television. In fact, I started doing Johnny Carson in 1964 when he was in New York. But I think the talent that Johnny had was, first of all, he knew the secrets of television. Johnny never tried to be funny. He let somebody else be funny, like Don Rickles, or something happened unpredictably with my animals. And Johnny had a keen sense of the absurd. He really did. I traveled with Johnny a few times, and it was part of his life. I think his main talent was his ability to be responsive in the right way, so it met the criteria of television, which was unpredictability and humor. That's the thing that really people laugh about. It was my job. They allowed me to bring animals that I thought would do well. So I couldn't do that show as often as they asked me because I wanted to make sure that I had the right kind of animal that might work well on the show. So I knew darn good and well that I was just as good as my last animals. So I couldn't bring on 4 tigers one time and a field mouse and a snake the next time, see? There are ones that stand out, but you know, luckily there were quite a few. But if I have a second, let me tell you about the Celebes ape. That was a wild story. And when we were sitting around a campfire in Africa together, his wife and his 2 sons and Johnny and my wife Betsy and me, I told him this story because he didn't understand what really went on before the Celebes ape. I was backstage, and a friend of mine who brought this little ape that was he was a big little ape, but he had huge teeth, and they're very aggressive. They probably look the weirdest of any primate there is. They have kind of a mohawk hairdo, black hairdo, and when he grimaces and shows those teeth, he's pretty spectacular. So Doc was trained to sit on your hand like this. Now, I didn't know Doc that well. In fact, a lot of the animals I brought out, I'd never seen them before, so I had to very quickly appraise the situation, or it might be the end of my career and Johnny's too. Anyway, Doc was sitting like this on my hands, back to me, with his feet out, and the trainer came over to me and he said, "Jim, I didn't want to tell you this, you know." This was at the last second. I was ready to go out. He said, "Jim," he said, "Doc has reached puberty, and now he hates any other male staring at him, making faces at him." And I said, "Larry, you got to be kidding. You know what Johnny's going to do."
Boy, that's the first time you've had...
How's that, huh?
Now that, obviously, is a monkey or ape family.
This is a member of the ape family. He's actually somewhat of a monkey, too. He likes your camera. That's right in the camera. This is a Celebes ape, and it's one of the few animals in the world that's actually worshipped. And that's all right. Come here. Come on, boy. That's all right. He's worshipped as an ancestor to human beings. Whoops. Hey, give me that ring. Hey.
How long have you had him under control, Jim?
No wonder. I wonder what he's
Just a little hand gesture. He's perfectly relaxed there.
I meant to have that.
How you doing?
Try to take that away from him.
What?
Just say you're going to take it away from him.
I'd like the banana.
Just tell him you want the banana.
I want the banana. Okay, I don't want it.
Doc, give me the banana.
Give it here. Give it here.
Come on.
Give me the banana. Give me the banana.
Doc went out and did a war dance and started throwing chairs through the air and everything off the table, which was about the level of the humor on the show, right? All of a sudden, here comes Johnny out there with a like this, making faces at Doc. And just as I saw Doc leaving the table to go after Johnny, I jumped to the left with a leash, trying to control him. It was too late. He slugged Carson in the chin.
This is called Doc?
Doc, come here.
It's called Doc.
Come on. Open. Hey,
Boy,
Doc,
he's frisky,
just a
isn't he?
minute here. Come on. Here's your chair. Hey, Johnny. You want to hold it? I want you.
Doc, sit down. Sit.
Lay back. Doc, that's all. Come here.
Well, Doc, easy, Doc.
Here. If you'll set this chair on.
Man and his monkey.
If you'll set this chair on.
Right. Doc, let's go. Doc, on your chair. On your chair.
Hey, Doc.
He punched me right in the mouth.
Doc, I don't do that. He's all right. He's just playing.
Playing, Mike.
Let's sit down. If I had looked at Doc, he would have gone for my throat, or Johnny, either one. So I had to pretend like I was the boss. I got out of there about as quick as I could. Several people have said that obviously Johnny and I had a rapport together. I mean, probably because I wasn't getting involved in his part of the action. I was bringing things on that I thought he would enjoy, but he also was a genuine person. He would come down before the spot, just a little bit before, and he'd always come over and say hello and talk a little bit. But generally, you didn't spend a lot of time with Johnny prior to being out there on the stage, and I think he felt it was more extemporaneous to do that. But I think that he did have that character that somebody from Nebraska would have. Oh, you know, it was a tough thing to do the Johnny Carson show with animals, because I'm a zoologist and I wasn't out there to do a circus act. In fact, luckily Johnny didn't want a circus act. He wanted something real. And I had limitations to my access to animals. Joan Embry, who was from the San Diego Zoo, had a whole collection that she could come from, and Johnny was good at holding one of those animals, you know, and the facial expressions and all like that. But I really had to do something that had a little bit of action to it. The more I did that, the more they wanted it. So I had been lecturing at the Explorers Club in New York City. I had on for whatever reason, I had on a tuxedo, and that little kinkajou was on my shoulder eating a banana, and I noticed it slobbered everything all over my tuxedo, which was not very nice to happen, but I noticed the audience had a big kick out of that. So I wasn't intentionally doing this, don't get it wrong, but I knew that kinkajou, if he ever did get on Johnny's shoulder eating a banana, it might be a great spot.
Not on this new coat. He does anything on this new coat, it's just going to be a dead kinkajou.
Sure, you might take a bite of that. He likes to watch.
Right, there you are.
If you eat it, he'll take it and then go with it. Yeah.
Right. Oh.
Anyways,
They're not
It's
dangerous,
from
are they?
well, they have very sharp teeth. And
No, the question, Jim,
Mainly
was,
for-
are they dangerous with their sharp teeth?
no, I don't. I think as long as he's on that banana, he's all right. But don't pick him up. I'll pick him up.
You do that.
If the
Okay.
time. You can just let him have that, and he'll take care of
okay.
it. But it's
These
this
are
is
from
a-
the... Do I have to peel it for him?
No, well, yeah, he'll do a pretty good job of that.
Yes, he
himself.
is. Right down to the fingers there.
This, yeah, right.
Okay.
You may want to put this. He does the.
All over my very expensive... Why don't you take this animal, Jim?
Hey, kinkajou, come on now.
New first-time worn on the show, and you bring out a sloppy kinkajou.
Come on. Here you go. Come on.
Get that I don't have any more.
Well, then I had the bear. That bear was another story. The bear, they told me, the talent coordinator, because I'd had bears on before, I said, look, you've never had one like this before, because this was actually raised in a trailer by a guy from a circus. And this bear had been part of their family. It would sit up at the table and eat cereal and things like that.
Bears will go foraging for food, won't they?
And if you're in the sleeping bag and they want some food,
They will unzip the bag. No, people make a mistake. They see a bear and they think it's a Disney character.
That's right.
And they want to feed him and cuddle him. And bears are,
they're
wild.
very. I tell you what else.
Don't drink that out of Ed's, or you'll.
If you'll notice,
That bear will hibernate for a year. He gets a slug of that.
well, the other thing, you know,
That bear will go in the camp. Hey, you got any food?
Right, here we go. Yeah, come here. Yeah, here. It's only iced tea.
Feed him out. Feed him out of this thing. What do we got here?
No, he likes this. I want to show you something.
That bear is hungry. When did you last feed this animal, Jim?
Hold that.